The Mediterranean night was a canvas of velvet black, the sea mirroring a sky peppered with diamonds. A super yacht, 3 decks high and with golden light, floated like a palace upon the water. Its name, the Elysium, was etched in gold leaf across the stern, visible even from the shore. This was no ordinary party. It was the event of the season. A birthday celebration for real estate mogul Adrian Beaumont, who had in just a decade turned his modest firm into an empire stretching from New York to Monaco. Guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits clinked champagne glasses as waiters in crisp white uniforms glided between them. Silver trays balanced effortlessly. On the upper deck, a live jazz band played to the rhythm of the waves, their music mingling with the low hum of laughter and conversation. Everything about the night screamed luxury. Rare wine, imported orchids, even a caviar station with a price tag that could pay for someone's college tuition. Adrian stood at the center of it all, tall and broad-shouldered in a midnight blue tuxedo, his dark hair swept back with precision. In one hand, he held a glass of vintage Dom Perignon. In the other, the manicured hand of the woman beside him. That woman was not his wife. Camilla Devereaux, a social media darling with 1 million followers and a smile as sharp as a diamond edge, wore a silver gown that shimmered like liquid mercury. Every movement of hers was deliberate, the way she tilted her head to laugh at Adrian's jokes, the way her fingers rested lightly on his arm, claiming him without words. Cameras from invited media guests followed them like bees to nectar. Camilla knew how to play to the lens. She had built her career on it. But even among the glitter and glamour, whispers had begun to slither through the crowd. "Where's Elise?" One woman murmured to another over a flute of champagne. "She's pregnant, isn't she?" "Yes, 7 months, but from what I hear, she wasn't invited." A knowing smirk passed between them. On paper, Elise Beaumont had it all. A handsome husband, a penthouse in Manhattan, a closet full of couture. But those who knew her closely understood the truth. In recent months, Adrian had grown cold, his late-night business meetings stretching past dawn, his eyes always on his phone when they were together. Elise had suspected the worst but had no proof. Until 2 weeks ago, when a friend accidentally sent her a photo of Adrian in Cannes, standing far too close to a woman with the same gleaming silver dress Camilla now wore. Elise had kept quiet. She had smiled at the right people, attended the right luncheons, and even sent Adrian a text that morning wishing him a great birthday. But tonight, she wasn't at home. She was in Monaco, and she was standing just beyond the velvet rope at the marina, watching the Elysium sparkle in the distance like some floating kingdom where she no longer belonged. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly, feeling the soft kick of the child within. 7 months. 7 months of carrying his baby, while he carried on with a woman who treated her like she was invisible. Her dress, a flowing midnight gown that accentuated her curves, wasn't the work of some stylist. She had chosen it herself, deliberately understated yet impossibly elegant. Her hair was swept into a sleek chignon, and a single strand of pearls rested against her collarbone. "Mrs. Beaumont, are you sure you want to do this?" asked Daniel, the family's former chauffeur, now her only true ally. He stood beside her in a crisp black suit, ready to escort her to the yacht. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Minutes later, a small motor launch carried them across the glassy water toward the Elysium. As they approached, the laughter and music grew louder, the lights more dazzling. Elise could see Adrian now, a perfect picture of charm. Camilla clinging to him like a jewel he'd just acquired. On the main deck, the band was in the middle of a sultry saxophone solo, when a sudden shift in the crowd's attention broke the rhythm. Heads turned toward the boarding stairs, where Elise, radiant and visibly pregnant, stepped onto the yacht. She didn't rush. Every step was deliberate, the kind of entrance that made time slow down. Conversations faltered. Glasses froze midair. Even the saxophone trailed off into silence. Adrian's eyes widened, the confident smirk faltering for the first time that evening. Camilla stiffened at his side, her perfectly painted lips parting in shock before snapping back into a tight smile. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the crowd, a journalist murmured, "This just got interesting." "Elise," Adrian said finally, his voice carrying over the stunned quiet. "What are you doing here?" She let her gaze drift over the glittering party before settling on him. I came to wish my husband a happy birthday. I thought I'd do it in person. Her tone was calm, almost gentle, but there was an edge beneath it, a current of steel that made even those who didn't know the full story lean in. Camilla shifted uncomfortably, her hand tightening on Adrian's arm. "Well," she began, her voice too bright, "what a surprise. We weren't expecting." "Clearly," Elise cut in, her eyes flicking briefly to Camilla before returning to Adrian. "But then, there's a lot I haven't been expecting lately." A murmur rippled through the guests. Elise's words were like a match struck in a room full of gasoline, hinting at scandal without lighting the full blaze yet. Adrian stepped forward, lowering his voice. "We'll talk later. This isn't the place." "On the contrary," Elise said, her voice steady, "I think it's the perfect place." The band had stopped entirely now, and all eyes were on them. The sea lapped gently against the hull, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Elise knew she had everyone's attention. She wasn't just crashing a party, she was starting a war. For a moment, no one on the Elysium moved. Elise could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing in, some curious, some pitying, others alive with the thrill of gossip. She let them look. After months of being ignored, gaslit, and replaced in whispers, she wanted them to see her, every inch of her swollen belly, every glint of determination in her eyes. Adrian cleared his throat and forced a strained smile toward the crowd. "Everyone, enjoy yourselves," he said, raising his champagne glass as if that could somehow erase the tension. "We'll be right back." He touched Elise's arm, a gentle yet firm pressure guiding her toward the edge of the deck. She didn't move. "No, Adrian," she said softly, but her voice carried. "I've been quiet long enough. I think it's time we stopped pretending." Gasps fluttered through the guests like a breeze over water. Camilla's lips tightened, her manicured nails biting into Adrian's sleeve. She leaned close, her whisper sharp enough for Elise to hear. "You said she wouldn't come." Elise's gaze slid to Camilla, calm and unblinking. "You really thought I wouldn't?" A waiter passed by, the silver tray trembling slightly in his hand. Elise caught her reflection in the polished champagne bucket, shoulders back, chin lifted. The same posture she'd been taught years ago in a life most people here knew nothing about. To them, she was the quiet wife, the one who wore elegant but understated gowns, the one who stayed home during late-night business trips. They didn't know the girl she had been before, Adrienne Beaumont. Elise Marlowe had grown up in Boston, the only child of a widowed mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Her earliest memories were of the salty wind coming off the harbor, and the sound of her mother's typewriter clacking deep into the night. Money was scarce, but her mother filled their tiny apartment with love, books, and the unshakable belief that Elise was meant for something greater. By the time she was 18, Elise had a full scholarship to Columbia University, majoring in architecture, a field that married her love of design with her desire to create something lasting. She interned with a prestigious Manhattan firm, working late into the night, sketching until her fingers cramped. It was during a charity gala her company sponsored that she first met Adrian. He was magnetic, confident, charming, the kind of man who made you feel as if the rest of the room had faded away. He'd approached her near the champagne fountain, complimenting the design sketches she'd been carrying. "You see the world differently," he had said, and she'd believed him. Their romance was fast and intoxicating. Within a year, they were married. Adrian encouraged her to take it easy on her career, insisting that she didn't need to work so hard now that they were building a life together. He promised they would revisit her ambitions once things settled. She thought it was love. In hindsight, it was control. By their 3rd anniversary, Elise's career had quietly disappeared, replaced by charity committees, social obligations, and managing the details of Adrian's growing empire from behind the scenes. When she became pregnant, she thought, foolishly, that the child would bring them closer. Instead, Adrian's absences grew longer, his excuses thinner. 2 weeks ago, she had been unpacking a shipment of baby clothes when her phone buzzed. A photo popped up from her college friend Savannah, a blurry paparazzi shot taken in Cannes. Adrian, standing on the deck of a yacht, his arm wrapped around a woman in a silver gown. The caption, "Isn't this your husband?" Elise had stared at the screen until her vision blurred. She hadn't replied. She hadn't screamed or thrown the phone. She'd simply known. Known that the marriage she'd built her life around was already over, and that Adrian's business trips were nothing more than escapes into someone else's arms. Tonight was supposed to be her answer. Not a plea, not a confrontation behind closed doors, but a statement, a living reminder that she was not the meek, discarded wife he thought she was. "Adrian," she said now, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart, "you're holding a party on a boat I helped you buy, with money I helped you earn while I'm carrying your child, and you didn't even think I deserved an invitation?" A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. Even the band members stood frozen, their instruments limp in their hands. Camilla's smile was brittle, her eyes darting toward the reporters who were subtly raising their cameras. "You're making a scene," she hissed. Elise stepped closer, the pearls at her throat catching the light. "I'm making a point." Adrian's jaw tightened. "This isn't the time or place." "Then when, exactly? After the baby's born? After the next yacht party? Or should I wait until you're parading someone else in front of the cameras?" Her words cut through the warm night air, clean and precise as a scalpel. From the corner of her eye, Elise noticed a few guests she recognized from past charity events, people who had once smiled politely at her, now watching with something closer to respect. Maybe they saw what she wanted them to, a woman who refused to disappear quietly. Daniel, her former chauffeur, remained near the boarding stairs, a silent pillar of support. He met her gaze briefly, a barely perceptible nod, reminding her she wasn't alone. The silence between her and Adrian stretched, taut and fragile. Finally, he exhaled through his nose and muttered, "We'll talk tomorrow." She smiled faintly. Tomorrow might be too late. With that, Elise turned from him, not toward the exit, but deeper into the crowd. Conversations reignited in hushed tones as she moved past clusters of stunned guests. Some stepped aside quickly, as if afraid of becoming collateral damage. Others whispered her name, like it was suddenly worth remembering. At the far end of the deck, a photographer snapped a shot just as she paused, hand resting on her belly, head held high. The flash popped, freezing her in time, the pregnant wife who dared to show up. Behind her, Adrian was already trying to recover the night, clinking his glass for attention, pretending nothing had happened. But Elise knew the tide had shifted, and so did he. Tonight wasn't about reclaiming her place at his side. It was about reminding him, and everyone else, that she was never just a decoration in his story. She was her own, and she was just getting started. The laughter didn't return to the Elysium right away. Even as Adrian tried to restart the party with his confident host's grin, there was a stiffness in the air, like a silk ribbon pulled too tight. Guests moved in smaller clusters now, eyes darting between the birthday boy, his pregnant wife, and the mistress in the silver gown. Elise wove her way through them with unhurried grace, pausing at the dessert table to examine a row of miniature pastries. Her fingers hovered over a chocolate truffle before she withdrew them and turned to face the ocean, as if she were simply enjoying the night. In reality, she was listening to the subtle shifts in the crowd, the soft gasps when her name was whispered, the murmurs about how daring she was to show up. Camilla, meanwhile, was unraveling in micro-expressions. Her smile was intact for the cameras, but Elise saw the rigidness in her posture, the way her gaze kept flicking toward the reporters. This wasn't the kind of publicity she wanted. She'd spent months curating her image as Adrian Beaumont's glamorous partner. She didn't need it undermined by the wife in pearls who refused to vanish. When Adrian rejoined her, Camilla immediately looped her arm through his. "We should move to the upper deck," she said, her tones sweet but sharp. "The view will make for better photos." Elise turned, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "Ah, yes, the view. You've always loved a good backdrop, Camilla. Shame about the company." A few guests stifled laughs. Others widened their eyes in anticipation. Adrian's hand tightened on his champagne glass, his knuckles pale. "Enough," he said quietly, but there was a tremor in his jaw. Elise didn't flinch. "You think I came here for a fight? I came here for clarity." She let her gaze travel slowly from Adrian to Camilla. "I wanted to see, with my own eyes, the kind of woman my husband thinks is worth throwing his marriage away for." Camilla's lips curled into a practiced smirk. "Careful, Elise. Jealousy isn't flattering. especially on someone in your condition. Her eyes flicked to Elise's belly, the implication venomous. Elise stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Jealousy? She let the word hang there, dangerous in its quiet. No, Camilla, this is curiosity. The kind a scientist feels when she finds a creature she's only read about in textbooks. Gasps rippled again. A waiter passing by nearly dropped his tray. Adrian set his glass down with a sharp click. This isn't helping anyone. Let's go somewhere private and talk. But Elise ignored him. She turned to the nearest group of guests, a tech investor and his wife, both of whom she knew from charity circles. Do you know, she said conversationally, that I worked with Adrian when he was building Beaumont Towers? I designed parts of the interiors. He told me once that I had vision. Her voice softened, almost wistful. Funny how vision disappears when you're no longer convenient. The investor's wife gave Elise a look that was equal parts sympathy and admiration. Adrian caught it and bristled. Elise, enough. She finally looked at him fully, her gaze unflinching. You had enough when you decided to bring her onto this yacht instead of me. Now you're just uncomfortable because I'm not playing my role as the quiet, dignified wife who disappears. The silence was electric. Cameras clicked softly. Even the ocean seemed to hush, waves lapping in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Camilla tried to salvage the moment, her tone dripping with condescension. I'm sorry, Elise, but this is my night with Adrian. I think you've made your point. Elise tilted her head. Oh, sweetheart, you think this is your night? She smiled then, a slow, deliberate curve of her lips that made Camilla's eyes flicker with unease. We've only just begun. She walked away before either of them could reply, making her way toward the bar where Daniel was standing. He handed her a sparkling water without a word. She took a sip, steadying herself. Her heart was pounding, but she wouldn't let it show. From this vantage point, she could see everything. Adrian trying to charm the crowd back to life, Camilla scanning her phone, probably checking how the photos were trending online, and the small groups of guests stealing glances at her as though she were the most fascinating thing on the yacht. Daniel leaned closer. You've rattled them. Both of them. That was the idea, Elise murmured, but it's not enough. What's the next move? She set the glass down carefully. The truth. A waiter approached, offering her a canapé. Elise declined, then asked casually, could you point me toward the yacht's PA system? The waiter hesitated, then gestured toward a discreet console near the DJ setup. Moments later, Elise stood there, microphone in hand. The hum of conversation dimmed as the guests realized she was about to speak. Adrian's head snapped up from across the deck, his expression tightening. Good evening, Elise began, her tone smooth. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elise Beaumont. Yes, that Beaumont. Adrian's wife and the mother of his unborn child. She let the words linger, felt the way they shifted the energy on deck. I wasn't on the guest list tonight, but I came anyway because I believe truth belongs in the open. She glanced at Adrian, then at Camilla. Some people here know me as a hostess, a fixture at charity events. What they don't know is that I was also a partner in Adrian's business in the early days. I worked on designs, managed client meetings, even helped secure funding when banks wouldn't take his calls. She let her gaze sweep the crowd. I believed in my husband. I still do, in a way. But belief should go both ways. Camilla stepped forward, hissing under her breath. You're humiliating yourself. Elise didn't look at her. What's humiliating, she said into the mic, is being erased, being replaced, watching the man you built a life with build a fantasy with someone else while you carry his child. The silence that followed was so sharp it could have cut glass. Then, somewhere in the back, a single pair of hands began to clap. Others joined, hesitant at first, then stronger. Adrian's eyes were cold, Camilla's were burning. Elise handed the microphone back to the stunned DJ, then stepped away. She didn't need to say more. Not tonight. The seed was planted, and the party would never recover. The applause died quickly, replaced by an uneasy hum of conversation. Adrian crossed the deck with purposeful strides, his hand gripping Elise's elbow before she could slip into the crowd again. We're talking now, he said, voice low but urgent. Elise pulled her arm free. You've had months to talk to me, Adrian. Why the rush all of a sudden? Because you're making a spectacle, he snapped. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Adrian, Elise replied, her tone razor sharp. I'm embarrassing you. His eyes flashed, but he forced a tight smile for the watching guests. "Follow me." Without waiting for her agreement, he turned and headed toward a polished mahogany door leading to the yacht's private lounge. Camilla followed at a measured distance, silver gown glittering under the lights like armor. Inside, the lounge was an entirely different world. Dimly lit, scented faintly of sandalwood, and insulated from the music and chatter outside. Plush cream sofas lined the walls, and a crystal decanter of whiskey gleamed on a sideboard. Adrian shut the door behind them, cutting off the noise. "You've crossed the line tonight," he began, pacing like a man cornered. "You could have handled this privately." Elise sank into one of the sofas, resting a protective hand on her belly. "Private? Like the way you handled your trip to Cannes? Or the nights you stayed late at the office with her?" Camilla's voice cut in, low and mocking. "You seem obsessed with me, Elise. Maybe that's your problem." Elise met her gaze without flinching. "Obsessed? No, I'm just fascinated by how you managed to look in the mirror." Camilla's cheeks flushed. Adrian stepped between them. "Enough. Camilla, give us a minute." Camilla hesitated, clearly unused to being dismissed, but she finally swept out, her perfume lingering in the air. When the door clicked shut, Adrian faced Elise. "What do you want? Money? The penthouse? You think showing up here changes how this ends?" Elise let out a small laugh. "You still don't get it. I'm not here to beg for scraps. I'm here to remind you that you don't get to write me out of the story I helped build." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You left the business years ago." "Because you asked me to," Elise shot back. "You said you needed me free to manage our life while you built the empire. But here's what you forget. Empires aren't built alone. I was there when you had nothing. I was there when banks laughed at you, when you pitched to investors who wouldn't return your calls. I put my own career on hold to support you. That was my choice. But replacing me with a headline-chasing socialite, that's yours." He didn't answer right away, and for a fleeting moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or fear. Then it was gone. "You're angry because I moved on. I'm sorry, Elise, but you and we're done." Her pulse quickened, but she kept her voice calm. "You really think this is just about us? You've built a life where appearances are everything, Adrian. Tonight, those appearances cracked." The door opened again. Camilla returned, holding a phone. "You should see this," she said to Adrian, her voice tinged with alarm. He took the phone, scanned the screen, and his expression darkened. "Someone leaked photos from tonight," he muttered. "You on the mic, Elise. It's all over social media already. Yachtgate." Elise's lips curved slightly. "Good. Then I won't have to repeat myself." Camilla shot her a glare. "You think this makes you powerful? You're a pregnant ex-wife in waiting. Once the divorce is final, you'll be a footnote." Elise rose slowly, her posture straight, her voice steady. "We'll see about that." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Enjoy the rest of the party, if you can." Back on deck, the energy had shifted. Guests were talking more openly now, no longer pretending not to stare. Daniel approached her quickly. "You all right?" "I'm fine," Elise said. "Better than fine." She glanced toward the upper deck where Camilla had fled moments earlier. "But I think she's not." Indeed, Camilla was standing near the railing, phone pressed to her ear, her expression tight. The silver gown caught the light, but it couldn't mask the unease in her stance. Elise could guess what she was hearing. Frantic PR agents, warning her that the narrative was slipping. Elise decided to push it further. She approached the nearest group of reporters, guests who'd been invited for their influence as much as their coverage. "If you're looking for a quote," she told them, "you can say this: 'I'm here to celebrate my husband's birthday, just like any loyal wife would. The fact that I wasn't on the guest list? That's just an oversight.'" Their pens scratched furiously. One of them asked, "Mrs. Beaumont, do you plan to stay married?" Elise's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That depends on whether my husband remembers who stood beside him before the cameras ever cared." Adrian re-emerged onto the deck, trying to reclaim control, but the reporter's attention was split now. Cameras flashed between him, Elise, and Camilla. 3 points of a triangle no one could ignore. Daniel leaned in. "If you keep this up, you'll own the narrative by morning." "That's the plan," Elise said. But she knew tonight was just one battle. The war would take more than public embarrassment. It would take precision. And she'd been trained for precision her whole life, even if Adrian never realized it. As the yacht cruised under the moonlit sky, Elise moved to the bow, letting the wind whip against her face. Somewhere deep inside, past the anger and the hurt, a colder resolve was taking shape. She wasn't going to fight Adrian on his terms. She was going to rewrite the terms entirely. And when she was done, there wouldn't be a single guest from tonight who would remember him as the man in charge. The night air was cooler now, a light breeze sweeping across the decks of the Elysium. The party hadn't recovered its earlier ease. Conversations were more subdued, laughter shorter and tighter, as though everyone was waiting for something else to happen. Elise could feel the tension in every glance, every whispered exchange she passed. She stayed near the bow, looking out over the inky water, her hand absently resting on her belly. She wanted them all to see her, the uninvited wife who refused to fade into the background. Every second she stayed was another reminder to Adrian and Camilla that they hadn't succeeded in erasing her. Daniel appeared beside her, his presence quiet but solid. "You've shaken them more than you think," he murmured. "I know," Elise said softly, "but rattling them isn't enough. I need them off balance, permanently." Daniel's brow furrowed. "You've got something planned." She allowed herself a small, knowing smile. "I told you I wasn't coming here to beg." From the corner of her eye, she saw Adrian moving toward her, Camilla a few steps behind, both wearing expressions meant to project control. Adrian stopped a polite distance away, as if they were still just another elegant couple at a party. "Elise," he began, "I don't want this to get uglier than it already is." She turned to face him. "Then you should have thought about that before you invited the press to photograph you with your mistress." Camilla let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You think you can stand here and play the victim? Everyone knows Adrian's the one with the empire. You're just—" She gestured vaguely at Elise's midsection. "Pregnant." Elise's eyes didn't waver. "Careful, Camilla, you're talking about the heir to that empire." For the first time, Camilla's smirk faltered. Adrian stepped in quickly. "We're not discussing this here." "Why not?" Elise asked. "Afraid they'll hear the truth? That the empire isn't as secure as everyone thinks?" That made him stiffen. A few nearby guests pretended to look out at the ocean, but Elise knew they were listening. Adrian's image had been built on the idea of absolute control. Suggesting otherwise was like touching a live wire. Camilla crossed her arms. "You're bluffing." Elise tilted her head slightly. "Am I?" Before either could respond, the yacht's captain approached. "Mr. Beaumont," he said respectfully, "there's a call for you on the secure line in the bridge." Adrian frowned. "From who?" The captain hesitated, then said, "From Mr. Channing." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Tell him I'll call back." The captain shifted uncomfortably. "He said it was urgent, something about the Monte Carlo deal." Elise hid her satisfaction. She'd made that call herself an hour before arriving, using a number she still had from the days when she managed Adrian's early investor relations. Channing was one of their most important partners, and one of Elise's oldest allies. Adrian left with the captain, tension etched into his shoulders. Camilla lingered, clearly unsure whether to follow or stay. Elise seized the moment. "You know," she said casually, "when Adrian and I first started out, we didn't have much. But we had relationships, real ones. I helped build those. People like Channing, they remember who took their calls when the banks wouldn't." Camilla's chin lifted. "You think anyone's going to choose you over him now?" Elise let her smile grow slow and deliberate. "I don't think, Camilla. I know." Camilla's phone buzzed. She glanced down, and Elise caught the quick flicker of unease in her eyes. Whatever she'd just read, it wasn't good news. Without another word, she turned and disappeared toward the lounge. Daniel stepped closer. "What's going on?" "Just the beginning," Elise murmured. A few minutes later, Adrian returned, looking less polished than he had all night. "We're leaving," he told Camilla curtly when she rejoined him. "Now." Camilla blinked. "But now," he repeated. The abruptness drew attention. Guests watched as Adrian muttered something to the captain and began heading for the boarding stairs. Elise didn't move. "Leaving your own party?" she called after him, her voice carrying over the deck. He froze, then turned slowly. "Some things came up." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "They usually do when the foundations are shaky." That earned a murmur from the crowd, a few raised brows. Adrian said nothing, but Elise saw the muscle twitch in his jaw. He left without another word, Camilla trailing after him, her silver gown catching on the yacht's railing as she stepped down to the waiting launch. With the hosts gone, the party fractured. Some guests departed quickly. Others stayed, eager to linger in the wake of the scandal. Elise, however, remained exactly where she was, knowing that every minute she stayed was another victory. Daniel leaned in. "You've taken the wind out of him. Whatever that call was about, it rattled him." Elise's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "It was about leverage, and now he knows I have it." She didn't elaborate, not yet, but in her mind, the pieces were already in motion. This was no longer just about confronting Adrian and Camilla. It was about showing them that she could touch parts of his world he thought were untouchable. And tonight, on his own yacht, in front of his own guests, she'd proven she was still a force to be reckoned with. By the time Adrian's launch disappeared toward the shore, the party on the Elysium had splintered into small, buzzing groups. Some guests were whispering to each other with giddy excitement, others scrolling through their phones to watch the drama already trending online. Elise remained by the rail, letting the night air wash over her. Daniel handed her a glass of sparkling water. "You've outlasted them," he said with quiet satisfaction. "I didn't just outlast them," Elise replied. "I left them with a mess they can't control." She didn't need to check her phone to know the hashtag was spreading. #Yachtgate, Mrs. Beaumont, pregnant and powerful. And she knew exactly how to keep the momentum going. As the DJ tried to coax the crowd back into dancing, Elise walked to the bar and requested the mic again. This time, there was no gasp of surprise, just a ripple of anticipation. People leaned in, eager for whatever came next. "I know you've all had quite a show tonight," she began, her tone lighter than before. "But before we call it an evening, I think it's only fair to offer some clarity." Across the deck, Camilla had reappeared. She stood stiffly near the upper-level stairs, a glass of wine in her hand, her eyes fixed on Elise. "When I arrived tonight," Elise continued, "it was to wish my husband a happy birthday. But I also came to remind him, and a few others, that some stories aren't as pretty as the pictures we post." A soft murmur ran through the crowd. Elise let it build for a heartbeat before speaking again. "See, appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the woman standing beside you isn't who she says she is." Camilla's chin lifted, but her grip on the wineglass tightened. "Sometimes," Elise said, her gaze locking on Camilla, "that woman has her own little secrets. And sometimes, those secrets have a way of finding daylight." Camilla stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Enough with the insinuations, Elise. If you have something to say, say it." Elise tilted her head as though weighing the moment. "All right, since you insist." She turned toward the guests. "Many of you know Camilla as a glamorous social media influencer. But what you may not know is that until recently, she was also under contract with one of Adrian's competitors, a contract that included certain non-disclosure agreements." Gasps flared. The implication was clear: conflict of interest, corporate betrayal. Camilla's face flushed. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Elise asked smoothly. "Because I have a copy of the agreement, and the date on it is, just a few weeks before you were first seen on Adrian's arm." A ripple of shock moved through the deck. Some guests exchanged glances, others pulled out their phones. Camilla's influence might play well online, but here, in a crowd of high-powered investors and executives, the mere suggestion of corporate espionage was poison. "You're trying to ruin me," Camilla hissed. Elise's smile was faint but lethal. "No, Camilla, you did that yourself. I'm just making sure the right people know." Daniel, standing near the edge of the crowd, caught Elise's eye and gave a small nod. That meant the email had gone out. Copies of Camilla's NDA, forwarded to select guests and a few discreet journalists, were already hitting inboxes. Camilla's mask cracked further. "You think anyone's going to believe you over me? I have 1 million followers." Elise stepped closer, her voice low but carrying. "You can have 10 million followers, Camilla. It won't help you when the people in this room decide you're a liability. And trust me, they're deciding right now." The DJ had stopped the music completely, sensing the tension. The only sound was the soft lapping of the water against the hull. Camilla tried to rally, her voice turning shrill. "She's just bitter. She can't stand that Adrian chose me." Elise didn't blink. "He didn't choose you, Camilla. He used you." And the second you become more trouble than you're worth, he'll toss you aside, just like he tried to do with me. The silence that followed was heavier than before, dense with the weight of exposed truth. Camilla's gaze darted around the deck, looking for someone, anyone to defend her. No one stepped forward. Finally, she slammed her glass down on the nearest table, wine splashing onto the white linen. Without another word, she turned and stalked toward the stairs. Police watched her go, then addressed the crowd one last time. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. And remember, what's built on lies never lasts. She handed the mic back to the DJ and walked toward the bow, the murmurs swelling behind her. Daniel joined her. That was surgical, he said. It had to be, Police replied. Camilla's the kind who feeds on attention. The only way to take her power is to turn the spotlight into a searchlight. And Adrian? Daniel asked. Elise's gaze was fixed on the dark horizon. Adrian's next. But with him, it's not just about reputation. It's about the empire. And I know exactly where the cracks are. For the first time all night, she let herself imagine what came after the party. The boardroom battles, the legal maneuvers, the quiet calls to old allies. She wasn't just going to survive this. She was going to take back everything Adrian thought he'd taken from her. And when she was done, he'd be the one standing on the deck, watching everything he'd built drift away into the dark. The party limped on after Camilla's exit, but it was a pale imitation of the glittering spectacle it had been hours earlier. Conversations were tight, and eyes kept drifting to Elise as if waiting for her next move. She gave them nothing but a faint, unreadable smile. Daniel returned from a short phone call, his expression telling her he had news. It's done, he said quietly. The documents are in play. Good, Elise replied. Now we let them simmer. She didn't need to say what documents. Daniel already knew. They weren't just the NDA. Camilla had signed with a rival firm. There were other papers, older ones, records that tied Adrian's earliest business loans to accounts he'd prefer no one ever examined too closely. These weren't things she'd stumbled upon by accident. Elise had been keeping records for years, quietly filing away details and transactions in case the day came when she needed them. That day was here. Adrian had always assumed she'd been too busy managing his social calendar and their home to notice the fine print. He'd underestimated her then, just like he had tonight. While the DJ tried to coax a few determined dancers back onto the floor, Elise slipped to the edge of the deck and made a call of her own. Savannah, she said when her friend picked up, I need you to leak something for me. Not to the tabloids, straight to the financial press. Use the contacts from the Columbia fundraiser last year. Got it, Savannah replied. How much do I tell them? Enough to raise questions, Elise said. Not enough for them to know the whole picture. Yet. When she hung up, Daniel was watching her. You're playing a long game, she nodded. If I go for him all at once, he'll have a chance to rally. But if I pull the thread slowly... She let the thought trail off, imagining the empire she'd helped build unraveling stitch by stitch. Her attention shifted when she noticed a few guests discreetly leaving. These were the serious players, the investors, the board members. Adrian had counted on this party to solidify their confidence. Instead, Elise had planted seeds of doubt that would grow in every boardroom conversation for weeks. It was almost poetic. Her phone buzzed. A text from Savannah lit up the screen. First bite. They want to meet. Tomorrow. Elise's lips curved. Tomorrow it is. Across the deck, she caught a glimpse of Camilla lingering near the launch dock, speaking urgently into her phone. The silver gown that had seemed so dazzling earlier now looked garish under the deck lights. Elise didn't care what Camilla was plotting. Her part in this was already over. Adrian was the real target, and Elise knew exactly where to hit him next. She made her way to the lower lounge, a quieter space where a few guests were nursing drinks and avoiding the awkward atmosphere above. In one corner, a man in a navy suit looked up as she approached. Elise Beaumont, he said with a polite smile. It's been a while. Too long, Mr. Crawford, she replied, taking the seat across from him. Crawford was a key shareholder in Beaumont Developments, a man whose influence often determined the outcome of board votes. I couldn't help noticing, he began delicately, that things between you and Adrian seem tense tonight. Elise's expression was cool. Tense would be one word for it. Negligent, reckless, self-destructive, those would be others. Crawford studied her. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Elise said, leaning in slightly, that the man steering the ship, literally and figuratively, may not be the safest captain for much longer. And that when the time comes to choose a new one, you might want to remember who helped lay the keel in the first place. Crawford's eyes sharpened. Interesting? They spoke for another few minutes, careful to keep their voices low. By the time Elise returned to the main deck, she could feel the shift. Word would spread, not loudly, but in murmurs and nods, in private phone calls after the party. Daniel was waiting near the railing. How'd it go? Better than I expected, she said. Crawford's not loyal to Adrian, he's loyal to whatever keeps his portfolio safe, and I just reminded him where the real danger is. The yacht's engines began to hum as it turned back toward the marina. Elise took one last look at the glittering lights of Monaco, knowing that when the sun rose, this night would already be reshaping Adrian's future. As they docked, guests offered her polite goodbyes, some with the kind of respect they hadn't shown earlier in the evening. Elise accepted each with a gracious nod. She could almost hear the gears turning in their minds, calculating how to position themselves if the Beaumont marriage and perhaps the Beaumont empire began to crumble. Daniel escorted her down the gangway. "What's next?" he asked. Elise glanced back at the Elysium, its golden lights reflecting on the water like a mirage. "Tomorrow, I meet with Savannah's contact. Then I start moving assets." "You still have access?" Daniel asked. She smiled faintly. "He never changed the passwords. Not for the accounts, not for the holding companies. He thinks I'm too sentimental to look. That's going to be his last mistake." The cool night air followed them to the waiting car. As they pulled away from the marina, Elise allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. The yacht party had been a spectacle. Yes, but it was also a warning shot. The real battle was only beginning, and she was ready for it. Morning sunlight poured over Monaco's harbor, turning the water into sheets of gold. From the balcony of her hotel suite, Elise sipped her tea and scanned the news alerts flooding her phone. Headlines blared across financial outlets. Beaumont Developments faces questions over offshore accounts. Sources claim possible board vote to remove Adrian Beaumont. Camilla Devereaux silent amid contract controversy. She didn't need to read the full articles. She already knew what they said. Savannah's leak had landed exactly where Elise wanted it to. Enough truth to rattle the board, but not so much that they'd rally to defend Adrian. The rest would come today. Daniel entered the suite, carrying a folder. They confirmed. "The emergency board meeting is this afternoon, and you're on the agenda." Elise smiled faintly. "Perfect." By noon, she walked into the Beaumont Developments headquarters with her head high, her navy sheath dress tailored perfectly over her growing belly. Cameras flashed outside the building. Financial journalists eager for a glimpse of the pregnant wife who had upended Monaco's party of the year. The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and steel, its long table polished to a mirror shine. Adrian was already there, flanked by two lawyers. His face was tight, his usual confidence dulled by the weight of the last 24 hours. "Elise?" he said as she entered, voice low. "Adrian?" she replied, taking a seat at the far end of the table. "Shall we?" The chairman cleared his throat. "We're here to address recent developments. Mrs. Beaumont has requested to speak." Elise opened the folder Daniel had given her, sliding copies of documents across the table. "These are records from the company's early days, loans and investor agreements I negotiated on Adrian's behalf. Many of these investors are still with us, and some of them have already expressed concern about recent leadership decisions." One board member flipped through the pages, eyebrows rising. "These signatures are yours?" "They are," Elise confirmed. "I was never officially credited, but I handled those deals, and I've maintained relationships with those investors. They trust me." Adrian's lawyer interjected. "What's your point, Mrs. Beaumont?" "My point," Elise said evenly, "is that this company was built on partnerships. Partnerships that are now in jeopardy because Adrian's personal conduct is bleeding into our professional credibility." The room was silent, except for the soft shuffle of papers. Elise let them read before she continued. "Yesterday's party wasn't just bad optics. It confirmed to key stakeholders that Adrian is distracted, reckless, and more concerned with his image than the company's stability. Adrian leaned forward, his tone icy. You think you can walk in here and turn them against me? Elise met his gaze without blinking. I don't need to turn them. You've already done that. I'm just giving them permission to admit it. A board member cleared his throat. Mrs. Beaumont, what exactly are you proposing? Elise slid another document forward. I'm offering to step in as interim CEO while the board conducts a full review of company finances and leadership. I know the investors, I know the projects, and I have no intention of selling my shares. Stability is the only thing that will protect the company's value right now, and I can provide it. The suggestion landed like a thunderclap. Adrian sat back, disbelief on his face. You have no experience running a company of this size. You're wrong, Elise said softly. I've been running it for years. You were just too busy taking the credit to notice. The chairman called for a recess. Board members filed out in small groups, some stopping to shake Elise's hand, others offering curt nods. Adrian stayed seated, staring at her. You've been planning this, he said finally. Elise didn't deny it. I had to. You stopped listening to me a long time ago. You treated me like a piece of furniture you could replace. But I was always part of the foundation, Adrian. And now the foundation is reminding you what happens when you ignore it. When the board returned, the vote was swift, 6 in favor, 2 against. Adrian was removed as acting CEO, pending review. Elise would take over on an interim basis. She rose from her seat, thanked the board, and walked out without looking back. Cameras were waiting outside. Mrs. Beaumont, is it true you've replaced your husband as CEO? One reporter called out. Elise smiled for the cameras, her voice clear. I'm stepping in to protect what matters, our employees, our investors, and the future we've built. Leadership isn't about ego, it's about responsibility. That soundbite would be everywhere by nightfall. Later, in the quiet of her hotel room, Daniel poured her a glass of sparkling water and raised it in a toast. To taking back what's yours. Elise clinked her glass against his. To never letting anyone write me out of my own story. She stood by the window, watching the sun dip low over Monaco's harbor. The Elysium was docked far below, silent and still. She wondered if Adrian was aboard, nursing the reality of his fall. As for Camilla, Elise hadn't heard a whisper. Likely she'd fled before the storm fully hit. The internet, however, hadn't forgotten. Clips from the yacht party were still circulating, alongside headlines about the boardroom coup. #pregnant and powerful was trending now, eclipsing even #yachtgate. Elise placed a hand on her belly, feeling the slow, steady movement within. This child would be born into a different world than the one she'd endured these past years. A world where she was no longer silenced, no longer underestimated. She thought back to the night before, standing on that yacht under the glare of cameras, facing down Adrian and Camilla. She'd walked in as the uninvited wife. She'd walked out as something else entirely. Not just a survivor, not just a mother, but a leader. And she knew with absolute certainty that she'd never let anyone take that away from her again. So the story has ended, my wonderful friends. Are you still here until now? If you are, something in this journey has touched your heart. Remember, as the philosopher Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Life will hand us storms, betrayals, and moments where others try to write us out of our own story. But we have the power to pick up the pen again. If Elise's fight lit a spark in you, let it grow. Share this moment, like this video, and subscribe so we can keep telling the stories that remind us of our strength. And please, drop a comment. Tell me your own yacht party moment where you took back control. Someone out there might need to read it tonight.